Starting the NFC East, I think the clear and obvious last place in that division in the NFC East is the New York Giants. They're a 4-13 team, and I think there's a chance Brian Daboll loses his job, and I say that as a guy who thinks Brian Daboll is as good as they come. But there's only so much he can do with Daniel Jones. Listen, the Malik Neighbors pick was great. Neighbors is going to be a really good player in this league, but the Giants are going to have a new quarterback in 2025. Some have floated Dak Prescott to the Giants. I hope that's not the case because I don't particularly trust the front office. I think Daboll gets fired. Listen, the Giants defense is actually quietly pretty good, particularly their front four is a really strong unit in the NFL, but they lose Saquon Barkley. Listen, I love Malik Neighbors. I love my man Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. They've got some pieces I like, but just Daniel Jones, God bless him, is... I always say, I talk about Gardner Minshew, low-end starter, high-end backup. I feel the same way about Justin Fields. I think low-end starter, high-end backup may border on generous for Daniel Jones. Listen, he grew the beard. Daniel Jones is a good-looking guy. Beard makes him look good, but he's coming off an injury, and his best season of his career, when the Giants made the playoffs 2 years ago, he threw 15 touchdown passes. And yet somehow got one of the biggest contracts in the NFL. Still can't figure that one out. So the Giants, obviously, will be in last place in the NFC East. At number 3, a team I consider putting in the playoffs, but decided to omit, the Washington Commanders at 8-9. So Jaden Daniels was one of my 3 favorite quarterbacks in this year's draft. I love Caleb Williams. I loved Michael Penix as kind of my 2 favorite guys. Jaden Daniels is kind of in that number 3 spot. Listen, we know the mobility he brings to the table. We saw it last year when he won the Heisman at LSU, and we know what the Washington Commanders have offensively. Brian Robinson Jr., really talented running back. They're able to, obviously we know they have Terry McLaurin on the outside, who's never in his life, with the Commanders at least, had great offense, had a great quarterback play. I really like what the Commanders have done in the last year or so, just organizationally, getting rid of Dan Snyder, bringing in this new ownership group, Josh Harris, Magic Johnson. They're going to turn around the culture of the Washington Commanders just as an operation, just as a business in a major way. And listen, I think Washington, give them 2 to 3 years, will be a really, really strong power in not just the NFC East, but I think the NFC. Dan Quinn's a really good head coach. He's gone to a Super Bowl, and they've obviously got Cliff Kingsbury, who's a really good offensive coordinator. So he'll put the guys in position to succeed offensively. And for a Washington defense that isn't terribly talented, especially given up the fact that they gave up, obviously, Montez Sweat to the Bears, Dan Quinn always gets the defensive side of the football right, if you really take out the last year with the Atlanta Falcons. I like this Washington team. If they make the playoffs, I won't be in the slightest bit shocked, but I decided to take them out just barely. They go 8-9. At number 2 in the NFC East, and missing the playoffs, the Philadelphia Eagles. They go 9-8, and they don't get in. This goes back, if we're talking about today's show, to what I said very early on today. The NFC is better and it is deeper than the AFC. What should I like about the Philadelphia Eagles? Oh, they have a great roster. Well, yeah, but they just lost Jason Kelce, the best player on their team and the leader of their team this offseason, who is still playing at an all-pro level. Jalen Hurts, who was great with Shane Steichen, took a big step back last year. Now the Philadelphia Eagles add one of the worst OCs in the league in Kellen Moore. Jalen Hurts is going to do some special things with Kellen Moore. Dak Prescott had the worst year of his career with Kellen Moore. Kellen leaves. Dak has the best season of his career. Kellen Moore then goes to the Chargers with Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert declines drastically after being fantastic the first 3 years of his career. Kellen Moore's a objectively bad OC. The Eagles defense, just by default, I would think, and adding Vic Fangio, who's, I think, an overrated DC, they'll be better defensively than they were a season ago, but last season they were probably the worst defense in football, so it's hard to get much worse than that. And Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts don't like each other. The articles have been scathing, but they have been well-sourced, and they come from all over the place, which has to mean where there's smoke, there's fire, as my man Ryan Flowers would say. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, good chance it's probably a duck. That's what I look at with the Eagles. It's still a really talented team. They'll win games just off sheer talent. Again, the NFC is stacked full of really, really good squads. Philly had bad vibes. They played off. They were the worst team, even worse than Carolina record-wise. The worst team in the NFL from week 13 on. I think Philadelphia is going to take another step back. Sirianni gets fired, and there's big questions. I still really like Jalen Hurts, but there's going to be big questions about Jalen going into the 2025 season. And at number one, obviously, that leaves the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this may shock some people because I have been, I think, harder than anybody in the national media, in the Cowboys fan base, than anybody on the Dallas Cowboys this offseason after obviously a disastrous playoff exit to the Green Bay Packers. Here's my logic for putting them at 11-6 and making the playoffs. Is that, do they have a guy who finished second for MVP last year in Dak Prescott? I believe they do. Did they sign CeeDee Lamb? Later than they should have, but did they sign CeeDee Lamb, who last year was the second best receiver in the league and only getting better each and every year? I believe they just did. Did the Cowboys have a great wide receiving core last year? Nope. Do they this year? Nope. So really no change. Did the Cowboys have a great running game last year with Tony Pollard? Nope. Did they have a good running game this year? Probably not. Rico Dowdle will end up being their best guy, and respect to Rico Dowdle, but he's Rico Dowdle. The O-line, I think, did get worse, which I think will, again, add an extra loss to Dallas in the regular season. Defensively, I do think they could get slightly better. The fact that Trayvon Diggs is back is huge for them. Losing Stephon Gilmore wasn't great, although Gilmore did kind of tail off at the end of the season. I do think the defense, though, will miss Dan Quinn. Adding Mike Zimmer. Zimmer's been a successful defensive coordinator in this league. Keep your eye out. Don't be shocked if there's at some point a controversy revolving around a dispute between Micah Parsons and Mike Zimmer. Don't be shocked in that. McCarthy's in the hot seat, but he's a better offensive coordinator, offensive play call than Kellen Moore was. So, listen, Dallas has their holes. Dallas has their flaws, which is basically everywhere in the receiving core, not named CeeDee Lamb. But I still like them to win the division because they have the best quarterback in the division by a comfortable margin. And just his connection with CeeDee Lamb. And Micah Parsons will be productive for 75% of the season until he tails off in December and January. Cowboys aren't a Super Bowl contender. I want to get that straight. They're not a Super Bowl contender. But Dak's too good. CeeDee Lamb's too good. Listen, the offense wasn't talented last year, and they won 12 games and nearly got the 1 seed. They can win the NFC East this year, so that's where I got. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.